Dismiss. Okay, so let me see if it's going to let me share. Yes, it is. Okay. Can anyone not see a Google Doc saying interactive document?
Wait, I don't. I see it. I see it.
Yep.
I see it.
Cool. Okay, so this is a completely standard Google Doc, such as any of you can get access to.
Mm-hmm.
I've written, click here if he chooses to struggle, click here if he chooses to relax. So then through on the next page, let's say this is for Albert's, life-saving thing. This is the script showing what happens if he chooses to struggle. Yeah. So we select that bit of text. I'm sure there's like lots of better ways to do, but let's just give you a basic idea. We select that. We click insert, which is a bit confusing, but that's what they call it. Insert, scroll down, bookmark. Boom. Okay. So we now have a bookmark for he struggles. Then we select, sorry, this should be he relaxes. Insert bookmark for he relaxes. Then we go back to the first page. Click here if he chooses to struggle. Select that line. Control K. I wonder if we can just do it as a link. Insert link. Select the bookmark. And this is the struggle, so we select the he struggles bookmark. Apply. Select the he chooses to relax text. Select insert link. Choose the he relaxes. Apply. Yeah. So it's unfortunately it's not a super sexy experience, but because what you do as a reader is you click that and then you click on the bookmark and that jumps you to the he struggles page. Or if you click that, you click on bookmark and it jumps you to the he relaxes page. Yeah. So that what we've got here is Martin falls into the icy water. And then we've got these two options. Yeah. So you see that using this sort of approach, we can create something where as you're reading, you can see it as an interactive thing. Yeah. So that because obviously, and so that just makes the script a much better model of an interactive experience. Of course, there's all sorts of, it's not ideal in all kinds of ways, obviously, but it's very simple and it does mean that you can kind of sort of simulate the experience that the user is going to get interactively, even though they're just reading a script. Yeah. So I assume something similar is possible with pages, but Jacob, in your case, obviously you're not having quite the same interactions, but maybe you are. Like if the audience chooses to give the contestant the whip, then this happens. If the audience chooses to give the contestant the bucket full of cream, then this happens. Yeah. So that again, you get a more sort of clicky, you get something which just feels a bit more like the actual interactive experience. Yeah. I've put the link to that in the chat. Yeah. Hello, Jocelyn. Jocelyn,
Hi.
when did you come in? Did you see enough of that demo to understand what was going on?
Yes, I came in when you started linking the bookmarks.
Perfect. Okay. So I've put a link to that document in the chat. So this doesn't mean that you have to use that. You know, if you just want to write as text, you know, Martin falls into the icy water. If he starts to struggle, jump to page 3. If he relaxes, jump to page 10. Or you could just do it all in continuous text. If he chooses to struggle, colon, and then write what happens if he chooses to struggle. And then if he chooses to relax, colon, right? But the problem, if you just do it in a linear way, that it's quite easy to make it so that you've forgotten what the original choice was. Because you're going to have, you know, in the case of the falling into the water, you're going to have multiple choices, right? So he's going to fall in the water and he's going to choose to struggle, and then something else is going to happen, something else is going to happen, something else is going to happen. If we then say, but what if he chooses to relax? Then remember, people are stupid, people are lazy. If you've got to make them think about, oh, we've got to go all the way back, what was that choice again? Then you start to lose them. But if you have hyperlinks in your script, then the reading experience can be a lot more similar to the experience that you're suggesting that they have for the real thing. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so shall we get started? Who wants to talk in more detail about their fabulous idea? Everyone sits there in frozen mode. Jocelyn smiled slightly. That counts as volunteering. So, Jocelyn, do you want to start us off?
Yes. Well, so basically, what I thought was, with my idea, I'm going for the one that I told you all about before, with the domestic abuse one. And I want to start it off with the person, the interactive person, or the text message of her friend saying.
So, Jocelyn, you're breaking up a lot. Do you mind to just go camera, as voice only, and we'll see if that works a bit better for us.
One moment.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sounding great.
Okay, cool. So basically, I wanted to start it off with her receiving a text message saying that her relationship isn't going as well, and if she could come over.
Jocelyn, just hang on a sec. So can we give these people names?
Yes, but I haven't figured out names yet.
Okay, but so there's the hero and the friend, right? Can
Yes.
we talk about the hero and the friend? Okay, fine.
Yes.
Okay, lovely. So and then can you just tell us, just give us an idea, where are we? Like, which country are we in? Which city? How old's the hero? I mean, they're both female. I'm taking it. Just give us, what are we seeing when we start with, please?
We're in the UK. Yep. We're with two women in their mid-20s, I'd say. I wanted to keep them a bit younger. And there's also going to be an appearance of the boyfriend within the story. So basically, the hero goes over to her friend's house and they start talking. Obviously, she sees that she's not in her best condition. She looks very worn out and tired. And at one point during the conversation, there's different hints that she might have been in a situation where there is domestic abuse, physical abuse as well. And I obviously haven't figured out all of the past yet because I'm still figuring out the entire story. But what I thought was, it's very conversation based. So it's in a room in the kitchen, for example, and the boyfriend comes home eventually at one point, and we see how the friend, the hero, and the boyfriend interacts with each other, and how the boyfriend is very passive aggressive, actually very rude to the friend. And then we have the hero either interacting with this and saying something to her friend or saying something directly to the boyfriend, which obviously would result in the boyfriend responding and her getting into a not so comfortable situation with the boyfriend, since she tries to kind of get into that whole thing.
Right.
And that would be the worst case scenario, that the boyfriend is getting violent towards the friend as well.
Right.
And
But is the boyfriend
this will
potentially
result-
getting violent with the hero?
Yes. Where there wouldn't be a direct interaction. That was one friend doesn't interact with the boyfriend but with the hero, and where the hero doesn't interact with the boyfriend but with the friend, and the friend tries to calm the situation down by talking to the boyfriend, who in my vision was sitting in the living room watching a football game, drinking beer, gets violent to the friend. If that makes sense.
Right. Cool.
So obviously, best case scenario is trying to get the friend out of the house and trying to talk to her in a way where she doesn't get interrupted by the boyfriend, and where she can seek help, tracks her most important stuff like passport and money and keys, whatever, and leaves the house. And the scenario would be that the both of them have to call the police because they get threatened by the boyfriend or even hurt by the boyfriend.
Right.
That was my thinking so far.
Great. Okay. How does the hero know the friend?
I haven't figured that out yet, but I'd say they're work colleagues or they know each other from university. So they've been friends for a while, so she knows how she was before that relationship started. But I wanted to make that I wanted to make the viewers know what happened through text messages of the hero reaching out to her friend saying, "Hey, I haven't heard of you in a long time. How's it going with Dan?" or whoever his name is going to be. Just invented that.
What about Jacob? I think that's a, if we want like a creepy name, something like that. Okay, fine. But no, Dan. Fine, Dan it is. Great. Okay, so so I love the idea. I mean, basically, so the whole scenario is very interesting. And of course, as I was saying before, these days everything is political. People are, lots of people are much more interested in funding something which has a mission. And obviously, domestic abuse is a horrendous problem. One thing to just consider is the whole coronavirus angle. That that domestic abuse has spiked horribly in the era of coronavirus, and I can't see any reason why your story couldn't be in the context of coronavirus. That that it's a coronavirus story, so maybe that is one element, which is of course not in any way to excuse what Dan is doing, but is just part of the sort of the build-up, that they're being shoved together a lot more than was the case before, that could be one element. Obviously not the whole thing, and one has to be careful to make sure it's not like, oh well, it's not his fault, it's coronavirus lockdown. But that could possibly be an interesting element. One thing just generally for all of us, for me watching, sorry, forgive me, Jocelyn, this is a little bit of a detour. But for me watching Bandersnatch this morning, of course, it's weird and creepy because, I was alive in 1984. I have no idea what I was doing on the 4th of July or whatever day that was. But, you know, I was alive then. And of course, the depiction of the mid-80s is kind of rubbish. The mid-80s didn't look like that. But you will have that experience, obviously, yourselves, you know, sort of later on in life. However, I think we will all have this experience probably quite soon with films set during coronavirus. It's going to be a genre. So just don't forget what it looks like, because soon is films and TV shows set during coronavirus, which will look more or less absurd depending on how they're done. But anyway, so coming back, Justin, to so you could possibly make it coronavirus, or maybe that would be too dating. But you know, makes it more contemporary potentially. So the thing of communicating via text messages is okay. The only thing is that text messages aren't particularly dramatic. And so the question there is, what information do you have to get across that you can only get across in a text message? I would sort of humbly suggest, obviously it's completely up to you, but if hero goes to friend's flat, that's nice, and it's very easy for you to set up. Oh, I haven't said. God, it's been so long. You know, something like that, and then things like she's not looking so great. That can be something that happens immediately. I mean, you know that thing where, you know, someone, you see, I mean, obviously it's kind of gone away a bit now with the world of kind of smartphones, but I remember the time where you didn't see friends for months or years, or family members for ages and ages, and you had no idea what they looked like. And so, especially if she is looking a bit rough, then maybe she hasn't been doing many selfies. So there could be that sort of, the door opens and there's like a sort of the shock. But then also, if he's being physically abusive, there can be a bruise. There can be a sign. And there's your drama. Boom, right there. Friends come round to see friend, door opens. What the fuck is that? And immediately you're in the story. You've set it up like in seconds. And then you know, obviously you can do it far better than I, but but then what the fuck is that? Or maybe she doesn't say it. You know, that could be a choice. Do you notice the bruise? Do you say, what the fuck is that? Or do you talk about something else and then more gently, you'll more gently raise the topic of what's that bruise. So which of course relates to a whole fundamental strategy, that do you go straight in and address the issues immediately, or are you sort of slightly more diplomatic? Now, this sort of question obviously then relates to, what is best guidance, and I have no idea what best guidance is, but it would be, as we were saying before with Jack, that research can be your friend here, that and I assume that, okay, so however you raise it, the friend is going to say, oh, it's nothing, it was an accident, or something like that. I mean, in my case, and I swear this is true, my partner ran into a wall by mistake shortly before we went to China to see her family. And she had this huge fucking black eye. It was so embarrassing. And she just had to say to everyone, I ran into a wall. She did run into a wall, okay? I wasn't even there. We had a small flat. I have no idea why she ran into the wall, but she did. So these things do happen. So she could say something absurd like, oh, I ran into a wall. And the hero could say, that sounds like, whatever. But then the nice thing is that what I suggest is, bring in a ticking clock. The boyfriend's coming home.
Yes.
So there's this kind of sense of dread that and maybe, I mean, obviously I'm just splurging ideas. Feel free to discard all of these. Yes, I know. Thanks, Jocelyn. Says Jocelyn. But maybe it's a surprise visit. Maybe Hero has said, you never replied to my text messages. I just live around the corner. What's up? And so it's a surprise. And then the friend is like super, super worried because the boyfriend does not want friends.
Any guests? Yeah.
Doesn't want any guests. He doesn't want any witnesses. He wants it to be just you and me in this house, and that's it. So then, again, you've got lots of jeopardy happening, and maybe there's like, oh, you got to go. You can't stay here, or something like that. So again, you're sort of like, there are all these, because you've come up with such a lovely scenario. There's all these ways you kind of ramp up the tension, and so that the choices feel more. I don't know what to do. Oh God, the crazy boyfriend's coming back, and he's gonna go nuts. And so and then of course this, so I think just in one thing is I did actually try, Jocelyn. Sorry, I've been trying to find this thing I did about 5 years ago with troubled youth about violence in relationships, and it's kind of vanished into the digital. I think it'll probably on an old computer of mine. But one thing that came across from there is not escalating the situation. So when the boyfriend comes back, one thing that they were very big on is don't directly challenge, because then he will get violent. That what you're trying to sort of de-escalate and get her out of there, get the police in. So obviously do your research and see what that says, but I assume that would be the sort of best practice thing to do. Get the friend comes in, stays with the hero. Friend doesn't have to stay here. Friend comes out and stays with the hero, and we're going to call the police, and they take domestic abuse seriously these days. It's not like it's just between you and him. This is a crime. That sort of thing. And of course the nice thing is if the aim is get out, then there you get some nice choices. But of course then what you can do is you can make it so she doesn't want to leave. She's scared to leave. She refuses to leave. And then the boyfriend comes back anyway. But so you're doing the best practice thing. Come on, let's go to my place. You can stay at my place, and you don't need your stuff. What do you need your stuff for? I mean, if just one thing, Jocelyn, if you don't mind my saying that, I think you sound a little bit like an expat with the thing about the passport. That when I lived in another country, I always knew where my passport was, because if shit hits the fan, you need your passport. But these people, unless that's the way you write it, these people, they just live in Britain. They don't need their passport. People lose their passport for years. I mean, especially these days. So she doesn't need anything. She just needs to come now. No, I'm scared. We might meet him on the way, or he'll guess that, or whatever. So sorry, shall I shut up now? I've been doing lots of talking, but I mean, what are you thinking?
Me or the others?
You.
Oh. I like the approach. I also like the idea of the ticking clock a lot. So I was thinking that they're in the kitchen and there is an actual clock ticking, and her saying, "Oh, my boyfriend's coming back at 6."
Yes, except clocks don't tick these days. I mean, how many people have actually got a mechanical clock that ticks? You do.
I'm wearing one.
But you're from Switzerland. It's different. It's like a cultural thing. Jacob has a ticking clock, but he's from Sweden. It's a cultural thing. Fine. I don't know. Okay.
No, but some people do have like those big claws. What I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So I
Um,
was thinking that.
okay. Fine. I mean, just to slightly back up what you said for the suicide film. We had this lovely guy who was a sound engineer who did the whole thing for nothing. And one version, he put in a ticking clock. So, because of course, sound engineers hate silence because there's nothing that they're sort of putting in there. And you'll have guessed, of course, that I was not keen on that, especially because there was no clock in
Yeah.
shot at all. So, what was this ticking? Where was this ticking coming from? But still, sure, if you want a ticking clock, then go ahead and yes, ticking clock. So anyone, but Jocelyn, what else were you thinking? Any
Uh,
other?
I think that I'm going to implement the coronavirus story so that it's during the time of coronavirus and the hero, sorry, um, is visiting her by surprise because she didn't hear from her in a long time. And you don't have to, there doesn't have to be texting them, but maybe she checks her phone really quickly and you see how on WhatsApp, you see how many missed calls there are in the chat. And you also see if you send messages and you get no reply, obviously, that the friend's worried and just surprise her, but you don't have to show that. You can also just do it by dialogue, actually, and just let the hero say.
Jocelyn, don't let me kill your beautiful idea of making it more contemporary by making it phone based. So, and that's, I mean, because I think, as I said, I think you can, cut to the chase and just have it with hero arrives. But
Yeah.
if you put it in the context of, she's a phone based person because she's, a normal modern person, then great. And then that's a nice way of showing that, that lots of script writers still really struggle with mobile phones. And I mean, obviously, it's mostly sort of older ones, and are constantly trying to dream up reasons why there isn't a mobile phone in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, cool. But I mean, all sounds great. All sounds great. Love it. Can't wait. We better push on. Who's next? Jack, should we go with you? So, you're a policeman. So, I think, as you know, lots of media people are sort of like very, very left wing. And as you also know, and no doubt many of your family members are aware, it's unfortunately become sort of fashionable in America to,
hate the police. Yeah.
hate the police. Thankfully, that hasn't really caught on here in the same way. But one thing I'd suggest is that you need a crime which immediately draws the sympathy of the viewer, regardless. Regardless of how left wing they are. So, I mean, what Jocelyn's just been talking about, domestic abuse, it's a horrendous problem, and it's one of the many crimes where the police are obviously, doing a fantastic job, and a lot of vulnerable people would be in deep shit without them. But so you see what I mean? It needs to be something.
I need some. Yeah, we need some sort of crime big enough to get anyone on the side of the officers in this game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, also I'm not trying to give you like interlocking stories, though that might be cool. But if you were to do something, given we've been talking about domestic abuse, it is indeed a case with domestic abuse that many abusers, I believe, are very clever in terms of being able to sort of weave stories about, she just gets she just goes crazy. She, gets, try and calm things down, but she always kind of flies out and this
Oh,
sort
yeah.
of thing. So that, because I think the challenge is to make sure that there's a real emotional jeopardy about the officer has got to get this criminal, because otherwise he's going to be released and he's going to go back home.
Yeah.
That you've got to, so it's not like it'll be good for his career if he manages, it's not like a bank robbery or something where,
Yeah, there's a personal stake.
it's a crime, but, like ultimately, if he doesn't catch the criminal, well,
We'll get him another day. Yeah.
we'll get him another day, sort of. Exactly. If there's some reason why, again, ticking clock, maybe he's already been. I mean, I tell you an example, and sorry to. We'll try and get off domestic abuse, but
That's
I
fine.
don't know if I mentioned this before, and Jocelyn, I'm happy to talk about this more if you like. But a friend of mine who none of you have ever met or will ever meet, who has absolutely nothing to do with CFS, a friend of mine was done for GBH for attacking his wife, and he obviously, this is just between us, but given that both of you maybe have got sort of similar things, and Jocelyn, I can give you lots more details if it's useful. He'd been on antidepressants. He came off antidepressants for no reason. Basically, I think he was just going a bit mad. Was slightly coronavirus related, and came off antidepressants and went on to wine, which was a fantastic life choice. And 2.5 weeks later, he had an argument with his wife, and it escalated, and he physically attacked her, and she called the police, of course, as she should have done, and he was arrested. But there was an interesting detail, which that he was put in the cells for, I think, 42 hours. Might be 42 or 22 hours. Jack, probably your family members could be able to check it out. But it was a long time. I think it may even have been 42 hours. So what I assumed they were doing was they were forcing him to cool off, because there must be domestic abuse things where, there's this kind of hot, violent thing, and we're going to take him down the cells, and we are going to sit on him for as long as we possibly can, because what we don't want is he's still angry, he's still got his blood boiling. We say, okay, well, and then we let him go, and he goes straight back and he finishes the job and murders her. I assume that's what they were doing.
Let him cool off.
Yeah. So Jack, you could have some sort of scenario like that, that there's that you've got to let the guy go. You've got to let the guy go in X time. In the case of my friend, and I'm not in any sense trying to justify what he did. I've known him since I was 7, but in his case, he had completely confessed everything. He was completely painfully honest about every last detail of what happened, as far as I'm aware. And so there was never any question about was he guilty or not. He had already described to them exactly what happened. But of course, you might be dealing with someone who's not like that. That there's some other crime, and maybe it's not domestic abuse, so that Jocelyn doesn't give me a hard time for stealing her idea, which of course would be a first, for me to steal Jocelyn's idea. But anyway, maybe it can be something more devious, like child abuse, for example. Maybe there's a child involved, and maybe they've got learning difficulties, so they can't speak. They can't really describe what happened, or they're too young, or like a bit of both. It's a sort of youngish child, but learning.
Or maybe it's one of those situations where, because I saw this on a show, on a fictionalized show, a child abuser made sure, however he did it, didn't leave a mark on the child, so there was no sort of evidence.
Absolutely. And these guys would do that sort of, would presumably they get onto chat and tell each other all these kind of horrific little tricks. So
Yeah.
exactly. So perfect. So you see, then you've got, I mean, that's a terrific idea, Jack. And so then you've got this, you've got this crime where everyone, of course, is just desperate for this bastard to get done. But there isn't any obvious, the child can't say anything. Maybe it's got severe autism or something like that, so is not really verbal, and yes, there's no physical evidence. It's just a question of somehow you've got to
get a confession out of him.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, there was one child molester, child abuse crime, whereas it was like hideous visuals. Do you remember and the guy had used Photoshop to do his face in a spiral?
I might have seen that. I'll have to double check.
So the thing, you see, in this case, the thing was, this guy wanted to show off. He wanted to show, he was taking pictures of his crimes, and he sorry, I'm just googling child abuse and it's too horrific to even look at. So he'd wanted to show off, so he took pictures of himself doing these appalling things, but his face, he used Photoshop and he did this spiral over his face, so it was this sort of very, 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 very distorted image, and so he was of himself doing these crimes, but with his identity disguised electronically, his scramble. Now, in fact, the happy ending in this case was that the world's Photoshop experts, got on the job and they unspiraled the spiral, because they knew Photoshop 100 times better than this asshole did, and so they unspiraled it, and there he was. So maybe it could be something sort of similar, that he's got some sort of, he likes to show off, that part of the sort of is the risk and the, you've got me, but you don't have me because I'm cleverer than you. That whole, maybe, but then, so I guess then the sort of, but anyway, sorry, but did you have any luck looking at sort of like interrogation techniques?
I checked out a bit of that video that you sent me.
Right. Was there any? I haven't. Was there anything?
I guess it was more like the reverse psychology angle. I thought was really interesting.
Okay, and what was that?
It was more trying to. What do you usually do? What was it in reverse psychology? You sort of lead into one angle. You kind of lead into the opposite angle to try and get them to confess it unintentionally to what you want them to.
Right.
Trying to like get them to trick them into saying what you want them to say by saying, "Oh no, this couldn't have been you. You're blah blah blah." Like too simple to pull off something as elaborate as this.
Right.
Trying to like insult them.
Absolutely. So exactly. So I can see you're a simple kind of bloke, right?
Yeah.
Anyone who had, okay.
Anyone capable of doing this would have to be much smarter than you are.
Right. Okay. Fine. I mean, I think the thing is that just there must be some tricks in there, and I mean, if you've got family members in the Met, maybe ask them.
Ask them how they interrogate people.
Because there might be some, because that's research is always the best way, and with an expert, always the best way. And Yeah, I mean, they might even be able to like put you in touch with someone who does that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, though, second, I mean, the problem with yeah, but also just online
Mm.
is
Online research. Yeah.
is you can obviously find out a huge amount that way.
Oh yeah.
Great. Okay. And then, okay, so we've got the ticking clock. He's going to be released. There's some, just bear in mind, just in terms of choices. So you can have like simple choices like we did in the suicide film, whereas you can say, you know, try tough love, suggest going out for a walk, or ask him if he's considering suicide. But don't forget also the way that you can also try more general emotions.
Yeah.
So and Jocelyn as well for you, that a more general thing about be soft and gentle or challenge directly. Even a choice like that might be interesting. However, actually, now I think about it, maybe not, because the tricky thing is that in both your cases, and also with Albert, you've got a scenario where any reasonable person is going to want to do the right thing. Any reasonable person is going to want to save the friend. Any reasonable person is going to want to put the child abuser away. So it's not a question of emotion or character. It's a question of like strategic approach. So if the emotional choice is about strategic approach, that's fine. But you just need to make sure that it's not like you're trying to choose what emotion the hero is feeling, because then you break the hero.
Yeah.
The hero has their own emotions. It's they want to save a life. The life of the friend, the life of the child that this arsehole's going to abuse. So it's not about a particular individual sort of foible. It's about just how are you going to get the job done. But okay, cool. I mean, so anything else, Jack?
No, I think that's pretty much covered it all. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Who's next? Albert, was that okay? Go ahead.
So yeah, as I discussed before, I had a few scenarios. I think I've kind of narrowed it down just to two, taking
Great.
Jacob's suggestion.
Okay.
So having one, which is the pool side one, which is you're predominantly the rescuer, and then the beach one where you're the victim, not victim, but person drowning.
Okay. Can I just jump in to start with Albert? So, jeopardy. We want maximum jeopardy.
Yeah.
We also want a nice, easy filming location.
Yeah.
With that in mind, I mean, obviously, it's completely up to you. But what I would humbly suggest is consider creepy, isolated bit of open water.
Okay.
So it could be a canal, say, if you want to film it in London, there's plenty of canals in London, but not a canal like Regent's Canal where there's lots of people. A creepy, isolated one where, it goes through like a sewage farm or, and there's no one for miles. But so it's still water, but there's a sense that it's up to you. And if you don't save that guy, or if you don't save yourself, you're dead. Because the tricky thing with a swimming pool is it's a public space. There are going to be, even if it's like early in the morning, there's going to be other people around. And, if you can't save him, then maybe someone else can save him, because there's all these people around and, there's someone in the office and yada, 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 yada. A beach, it can also be deserted, but then you've got the whole challenge of it's much more weather exposed. that you're vulnerable to you know, the weather, which you are with any sort of filming, but the sea is like notorious, obvious for like being the sea and being completely unpredictable. The other great thing about something like a canal or a quarry is that they're really fucking dangerous because the water's deep and it's cold. Now that, of course, is not an advantage when it comes to filming, but you know the actors can have like wetsuits underneath their clothes, and you know you'll have a safety guy there anyway, so it's not so bad. But again, also with the beach, you know, it's like sloping, whereas a canal or a quarry, you're just going straight down. And so you've got this kind of immediate maximum risk rather than a gradual, gentle, you know. I mean, the Thames is an incredible location. And this is just a general point, quite apart from drowning. Some of the greatest locations in London and the least used are Thames at low tide type locations. There are some unbelievable sort of deserted, ruined, derelict structures which are completely untouched because they get covered by the tide, but at low tide they're amazing. However, the Thames is fucking dangerous, and well, it depends where you are. I mean, there are deserted bits, but I think for the moment, just assume it's a canal or a quarry, something like that. But you know, up to you, obviously. But it's about jeopardy as well as a filming location that is yeah. Okay, but so sorry, keep going. So you're talking more about the scenario. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, a canal would work for the scenario. I've kind of written out the scenario. Well, some of it, not I haven't finished it, but it's nearly done. Or one of them anyway. But it would work with a canal. It kind of makes more sense.
You hear that, everybody? Albert is ahead of all of you. Okay. As far as I'm aware, Jacob's looking at me like, oh no, I've already finished mine. But anyway, okay. So sorry, yes, go ahead, Albert. But yeah, good gamesmanship, subtly one-upping the fellow students.
That was not the plan.
That's the way it's done. Oh no. Right. Okay. Yes. Keep going. Yep.
So yeah, the scenario, if I change it to a canal now, it's just a couple of friends, walking alongside the canal, I guess. Right. And they're kind of joking about and stuff, and one of them kind of accidentally pushes the other. I guess if there's like 3 or 4 friends, so there's the hero and then the I don't want to say victim, but I can't think of a better word for it, but the person who's going to drown. Okay, yeah, so yep. The hero and the victim, and then maybe 1 or 2 other friends, and yeah, they're joking around, and then one of them pushes the victim in accidentally, and then they start drowning, and they're like joking like, come on mate, and it's like then they realize he's actually drowning, and it's like, okay, what do we do?
Good. Yes. I mean, if they're slightly drunk, you know, they've been to the pub, so it's like 11:30 or something like that. That could add to a general sense of jolliness, clumsiness, and sort of extreme danger. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, then I had like a lifeguard choice, but that can go, I guess.
Again, the problem with lifeguards is that the jeopardy goes away. You've got a trained professional who you assume can handle anything. And you want, you know, normal people.
Yeah, that was one of the struggles I was having. I was like, how do I make it so the lifeguard is not there? And I was like, why would the lifeguard not be at the pool? It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
Yes. So then like the first choice comes up of there's going to be a recurring choice of jumping in basically a lot of stages, because jumping in is like the last thing you do, but it might be like your first instinct. So the first choice is to kind of jump in and try and rescue him, or get one of your friends.
Okay, so sorry, it's the last thing you do. You mean that's the thing you're supposed to do last, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's like a series of.
So what are we supposed to do? What's the correct?
So the first thing we're supposed to do is to try and get something like a branch or something to extend yourself to be able to pull them in for them to grab onto and pull themselves.
Okay, good.
So
Love
that's the
it.
first thing we're looking for.
But so the third's a terrific choice, Albert. Love it.
Mm.
You'll get them every time with that choice.
Yeah.
Jump in or try and find a branch. Try and find something. Yep. Also I'd suggest, Albert, if it can be just one hero, then there's more jeopardy. If there's an idea that like we're a team, and so like then one can jump in, one can find a branch, while the other one rings the police. Then jeopardy goes right down. It's just one person. Okay, so find a branch or jump in.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so what's the next thing we should do?
So if we can't find a branch, or if like the branch is not working, if they're just not able to grab it, or in some ways like too short or whatever, then we should call 999 at some point. But I think we can call them after we've rescued them. This is why I had multiple people, but
it's okay because I mean you're like miles away from anywhere. And so maybe it could be like it's a canal like out in the countryside somewhere, where you ring 999 and it'll be like half an hour before anyone turns up. So, and that's the thing, the guy's drowning now. So the police will turn up to sort of identify the body. But if you actually want to save the friend, and that's a key thing to sort of get out of the way. I should point out with all the lifesaver films, they always ring 999 to start with, but it's going to be like 8 to 10 minutes minimum before the ambulance turns up. They'll be dead by then. So you've already done the due diligence of trying to get the police, but you're still fucked because it's still up to you. So you could even make that. What's the sequence? Is it first try to ring 999 or first try and find a branch?
I believe it's 999 and then
get the branch. So do the 999, get that out of the way, because lots of people, that's the only thing they'll be able to think of. It's like obvious. Ring 999 and ring 999 and put the phone down somewhere so that it's it's not going to get wet if you jump in. So that might be cute if he jumps in with the phone. Anyway, okay, branch. All right. So we've rung 999, but they're going. They're 10 minutes away, and he'll be dead by then. Fine. So then we try and find the branch. What's our next?
Then we can actually jump in. Okay. But there's another choice here, which is approaching our victim from the front or approaching them from behind. So the incorrect thing to do is approach them from the front, because the person is scrambling and they can end up pulling you under as well, and then you both drown. So you want to try and get them from behind in any way possible. And then the next choice would be it kind of depends if they're conscious or not. So this was something I was going to ask you about, because there's kind of two ways to deal with this, because if they're still conscious, then you kind of grab them in a different way to if they're unconscious. So if they're unconscious, you put your arm like over their shoulder and you stroke with one hand. But if they're conscious, then usually if you can, you would take something like a flotation device or something, and then you would put it on their chest and then like put your arms around them and pull them back. But if you don't have that, then you just do the same thing, putting your arms around their waist and then kind of backstroking, like with your feet, and pulling them to shore like that. So I wasn't sure how to handle that, because it's kind of two different things for two different situations.
Well, I think we can assume you don't have a flotation device.
Yeah.
I mean, it would, it's not a very friendly canal, shall we say? And certainly you might need it might be a bit of a stretch that I think it's perfectly credible that there's no stick, and I think it would be not credible if there was anything that could use as a flotation device. I think that would feel like it was a cheat, that that you wouldn't, there might be like, it's like a foam expanded polystyrene packing crates or something like that. I don't think people would buy that. It would seem too far-fetched. So I think there's no flotation device. So then the question about, is the victim conscious or not, is really a dramatic question for you to consider. I mean, I think unconscious is probably more creepy.
Yeah.
Unconscious, there's more of a sense of maybe he's dead already. It's this whole thing of, if the guy's screaming, then he is obviously getting air into his lungs. He's obviously capable of feeling pain. He's conscious of all sorts of great things that you want someone to be in that situation. Whereas if the guy's silent, then you have no idea. He might have drowned already and might just be wasting your time, which is a lot more creepy. Also, the thing is that the screaming is really difficult. With Lifesaver, we had one of the few things that didn't work with what we shot originally was we had one where there was a victim and his wife turns up. The victim, like, the wife goes off to do some shopping, and then the guy collapses with a cardiac arrest, and then the wife comes back, and there's the, oh fuck, it's, wake up. And we just had to spend a lot of time in post just getting rid of her, because it just got really annoying. Just the constant moaning, screaming, da 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 da. It was distracting and it was irritating, and it didn't work. And I think it would be similar with someone drowning. It's like, they're drowning, we get it. But so it would be really tricky to have this monologue of whatever the hell he's going to say. Whereas just silence is I think, it's easier to write, which is a big plus. And it's more creepy because, then you just have no idea what's wrong with him. Maybe when he falls in, maybe it's not a clean fall. So it's like he trips up and he hits the concrete ledge and then he goes in. So that increases the sort of the jeopardy and the sense of unknowing, because that maybe he's you don't know how bad the damage is from the fall. And so it's quite possible. So he's unconscious when he goes in the water. So do you see what I mean? So yeah. I think then you've got a nice, very creepy situation, and then also for the stick, that's nice, because then the hero can be offering the stick, and it's a perfectly good stick, but the guy's just not responding. And so then, all the onus is on the hero to, then do the next thing. Maybe.
Yeah.
Cool. So then we've jumped in where he's unconscious, let's say, for the sake of argument. I mean, obviously, feel free to completely undo all of this. But so he drags him to the thing, and then what? Is there anything about getting him out? I mean, pulling someone out of water when you've just had the also when the hero jumps in, there you can put in the thing about just pause 5 seconds, don't immediately scramble so hero doesn't die of a heart attack. Because of course that's the thing with this kind of high risk saving situation, is people often die trying to save drowning people. I mean, it often happens. So that's one thing. He jumps in, he relaxes, and then you've got the bonus, because that's very non-obvious. Then he does it, he's pulling him out of the water, then what? Trying to pull him out of the water.
So the technique to pull them out of the water was to get to like the ledge or the shore, whatever it is. And then you use one hand to balance yourself and try and pull them up, I guess, while you're still in the water. Basically, you want to get them up first and then pull yourself up second.
Sounds easy.
Yeah, it looked pretty difficult as I said, but it was doable. Like people were doing it.
Yeah,
It's
I
actually
know.
easier than it.
On take 5 or
Yeah.
take 10 when they're like super fit professional lifeguards who've been practicing all week for the video that they've got to make. Okay, well, great. But I mean, it's a fantastic scenario because heaps of, it's obviously going to be really, really difficult for a normal person to do something like that. And obviously most canals were not designed for ease of access. I mean, what you have on the Thames is you have these chains which were put on after the Marchioness disaster. Are you aware of the Marchioness? So the Marchioness was happened in the 1980s or early 90s, and it was one of these Thames pleasure boats, and it was like a kind of party night on one of these boats, and the boat got run down by a big sort of a big ship carrying sand or something like that. No, it's a tug rather. Something anyway, big. And what happened was that the boat just crashed straight into the pleasure boat, and so it went from being party night to the entire boat underwater in about 30 seconds. I mean, it was almost instantaneous. And 20 people drowned, 30 people drowned, and all, young 20s, prime of life, yeah. So one of the things that happened with that was it happened in the center of town by by Southwark Bridge, London Bridge, where the Thames is very narrow compared with like it is out here at Greenwich, and it flows fast. And what they found was you had all these big stone walls, and so there were people who survived, but they couldn't get out because it was just these big stone walls. So there's nothing to grab onto. So now what you'll see is along a lot of the Thames, you have these small chains, and they are just normal little sort of metal chains, and they're things to grab onto. They're things to hold on to, so that next time, if God forbid there is a next time, people can just hang on to that. And that's what they can handle. Now, your canal doesn't have that. And so I think you've got an obvious dramatic thing of how do I get out of this fucking canal? And, you've got your friend, he's unconscious or she's unconscious. And that's just one thing to consider also, by the way, is that by default, the victims in these things are almost always male. There's this huge problem with CPR films. The victim's always male because it's too embarrassing to show breasts, right? And I actually tried to get one of these films to be a female victim, but they wouldn't do it because it was too embarrassing to show breasts, which means that women have a lower chance of surviving if they have a cardiac arrest because no one's ever practiced on a female victim. It's unbelievable, isn't it? But so just bear in mind that sort of the default choice would be to have a male hero and a male victim because that's what these films normally have. I would suggest go the other way, or consider going the other way. That maybe they're both female. Just something to consider. Okay, so we've got to get the victim out. That's going to be really, really hard. You may even need to cheat it a bit so it's credible that so it's not so hard. That the canal is only like from the top of the water to the towpath is not very much, which it usually isn't, so that it's credible that you can push the victim up and out, because I would have thought that was a big job, especially if you're in icy water yourself. Okay, great. But so we've got out and we ourselves have got out. Then what?
Then it's the kind of CPR kind of section, which is check for breathing and then check for pulse. And
Albert, leave, mute, exclude. You don't check for pulse.
That's what the guide said. The guide said to check for breathing and then check the pulse afterwards.
Oh, you're kidding. No, that's ridiculous. No, CPR guidance, you should send that to me. I'll send that to you.
Okay.
Because, no, they gave up check for pulse years ago. Lay people can't check for pulse. If you're a trained professional, you can check for pulse. But people like us, if we try and check for pulse, we will feel the pulse in our own fingers. It's difficult to check for pulse. So yeah, there's but yeah, make that a choice. Check for pulse, don't check for pulse. That is actually a choice somewhere in Lifesaver, I think, and it's definitely wrong. So you could do it, and you could say, yes, please ignore the guidance from the whoever it is. Yeah, okay, great. What's next? We better push on, or Jake will hate me for not spending enough time on Olympus Boogie.
It's basically just like, start CPR.
Fine.
And just
So
some things
start CPR. Bear in mind, I think the thing is, don't get into CPR because that's my territory, okay? No, but seriously, because there's all this stuff about CPR, and there are other ways that you can learn CPR, aside from Lifesaver, which of course is what you should do. But you see, but by now it's credible that the police turn up. So you get them out, and then it's blue flashing lights, and the ambulance people walk swiftly. They don't run. Is another mistake we made. So then that's fine, because so they can start doing CPR, and that gets across the message. You start doing CPR, but that's a whole other film in itself, obviously. So I wouldn't get into that. You've done the drowning thing. Yeah, great, love it. Okay, anything else? We good?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a few side things about like, if you can get them warm or keep them warm, if you have like a towel or something, or I guess if the hero's taken off their jacket to jump in the pool, then they can use that. And also to turn on their sides because they might start throwing up like water and stuff that they've swallowed.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the thing is that you're slightly fighting the CPR thing, because if it's CPR, you've got to open their clothes anyway, and you can't put them on their side to do CPR.
Oh no, these are things after the CPR. Sorry.
Oh, after the CPR.
Yeah, after CPR, then you want to keep them warm, and then the side thing.
I would suggest for the moment, just start CPR, and then the blue lights arrive, and that's the end of the film. That's the happy ending. And the key thing, they thank you. They say you've done a great job. So you give this emotional, yes, I fucking did it. Okay. That's the key thing. Yep. Okay. Fantastic. Sounds great, Albert. Jacob, what have we decided to do?
We have decided to do the racing game.
We've decided to do the racing game. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Go on. Yeah. Go ahead.
And I was thinking about what we talked about earlier with especially with the Formula One thing, where they want a certain racer to finish before the other. And I like the idea of actually implementing like cheating within the story itself and on the racetrack. So one idea that I got was that you, during one race, for an example, you could suddenly get like an engine failure, which would result in you not being able to finish the race at all. You get like disqualified to finish it. And afterwards, once like, what do you call it? The shower room or whatever. One of your teammates claims that it's sabotage from one of your rivals in this case. And basically, they start to come up with a plan to take the gloves off and respond with the same method, aka like sabotage her ship for the next race. And you have like your closest friend and mechanic who works on your ship is against this, primarily because it would be her that would have to do it, basically. And there you are presented with choice, which is either to approve this sort of sabotage plan or refuse it. And the effect, if you say approve it, would be that the next race goes on, and the speeder of your rival malfunctions as planned, but it results in a crash that actually kills a group of spectators the racer gets hospitalized. Another effect of that is your friend that you played the majority of the game with leaves the team and leaves you behind, and the tournament goes on without that player. And it sort of also plays into, like I talked about earlier, that you sort of get to race through your character's mind in different flashbacks and guilt-ridden nightmares and whatnot. And depending on the choices you make, those take different shape. As for an example, if you take that choice, obviously, like, that will come into play in that sort of thing as well. And then, like, if you refuse the sabotage plan, the tournament goes on as usual. Like, nothing happens, basically. And yeah, and just continue as planned.
Sorry, Jacob, you're breaking up a lot. Do you mind switching off camera?
Yeah, sorry.
So, because I lost a bit of that, but okay. So, how familiar are you with racing films as a genre?
Actually, a little bit. I mean, I've seen what's it called, Rush, and the one Ford v Ferrari.
Right.
I saw both. I enjoyed quite a lot.
Okay. Because what I'm thinking is, could you have like race mode and story mode?
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So there's race mode, and that's normal racing, and then there's story mode, which is this story.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the so we're in story mode, and so I think the thing there is that I would suggest, why don't we just say, for the sake of argument, I mean, obviously you feel free to completely discard this, but you see, I'm just, as I was saying before, I'm worried about the purity and honesty of, about players' perception of the purity and honesty of the racing. And that the way to get around that is that they don't race necessarily if they're in story mode. Is that an option, or they've got to race?
I would say that they should race, definitely, because otherwise, like, the cause and effects system of the story, otherwise it just becomes like a regular choose your adventure game. The idea is basically to have like a cause and effect system between what happens on a racetrack and beyond the racetrack, which is also why I wanted to implement that this is like a future setting, so you could implement more satirical elements about corruption and celebrity worship,
Right,
and whatnot.
But
so basically, sorry.
What's a bit? Have you played what you call it? What's the huge adventure game? Uncharted?
I have, yeah.
I mean, yeah, fine. So, what about thinking about it like Uncharted? So that, because Uncharted, correct me if I'm wrong, you definitely have a story all the way through, but then you also have a number of skill-based moments, or skill-based episodes, which you need to complete to a certain skill level in order to go into the next bit of the story.
Yeah, basically like a regular video game. Yeah.
It is a regular video game. It's a hugely popular video game. So what I'm thinking is, if you had it like that, then the racing elements, if you were in Uncharted story mode, the racing elements would be things that you would need to complete to a certain skill level. And if you failed to do that, your character would die, or you would crash, or it would but it wouldn't particularly lead anywhere. As with Uncharted, if you fail to get to the, if you fail to sort of escape from the museum where they've got the Drake's sort of treasure, and fail to climb up on the roof and so on, nothing happens special. You just don't continue. You have to succeed. You have to
Yeah.
do it. And you can choose your level, you can choose expert or beginner, and you have to complete that to get onto the next bit of the story. Now, if you had an Uncharted type approach, then do you see what I mean? That you could have all this fantastic story that you've got, and you've still got racing, where it's like you've got complete freedom to crash into the wall or, you know, go backwards or whatever, but you're not going to get to the next bit of the story till you complete successfully. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you.
Maybe. So just consider that as a because the thing is that then you can have all these devious complex plot twists that you're talking about without the thing that every time the whole fucking story might go out the window, because there's a genuine race that anyone might win, as is the case with any race. Yeah? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but so maybe that's a good idea, maybe it's not. In my mind, I will keep assuming it's something like that. It's something like Uncharted, so that I don't have to worry about the racing game challenge. Okay, fine. So, all right. So just tell me what the. So who's the hero? And where are we? This is in the future, or
Yeah, I said just because it sounded nice, I said 2112. And basically,
Okay.
I've written like a little introduction to it.
Yeah.
Which is the year is 2112. Global conflicts and natural disasters have torn up vast regions of the world. Tech giants and philanthropists rule the world in a post-World War III globalism, and hyperdrift is their favorite display of power and technology, which is a motorsport in which hovering speeders race across vast magnetic tracks.
Right.
And you play as Morgan Reeves, a middle league hyperdrift pilot from a broken background struggling with substance abuse. But with the support of your closest friend and mechanic, Nikki, you're able to get a shot at the big leagues. And entering a world of riches and corruption, your choices as Morgan, both on and beyond the racetrack, will shape outcomes in a organic cause and effect story system. That's basically what I wrote.
An organic cause and effect story system. Cool. Okay. Lovely. Just right. And target platform, age of, core demographic of, the people you really want to play this.
I don't know, with substance abuse it might be difficult, but I'm thinking like 16 plus could work, perhaps.
And male?
Male and female. I was thinking because Morgan is the name for both girls and boys, you can choose your gender in the beginning of the game, like what gender is Morgan, as an example. Same thing with basically one of the big inspirations, now that I think about it, is the game that comes out soon, Cyberpunk 2077, which is where you choose your gender in the beginning, and like there are like multiple different ways your story can go depending on the choices you make.
Right. Cool. Okay, fine. So it's that sort of cyberpunk, Blade Runner-y, sort of dystopian, future-y type world, yeah?
Yeah, I could say it. Yeah, for now, I would say that it's definitely more. Yeah, it's leaning into that, I would say.
Okay. Fine. So I think what I think we need is okay. And so, and what's our choice? What's our give me an example of a key choice. I mean, I think I know what you're going to say, but just within now we've heard the setup, what's a key choice that we've got?
Well, I mean, I think like another choice I was thinking of would be, say that you're like in a nightclub, with like all the other racers and like what do you call them, groupies and whatnot, and you can choose to end up in an argument, almost leading into a fight with another pilot, and then later on in the next race you'll notice that that pilot and his speeder is way more aggressive towards you in the race than they were before, basically because of the argument that you had.
Okay, but that's not the key choice. The key choice is this corruption-related choice, right?
Yeah, it could be as well.
So
yeah.
I mean, is it going to be the sponsor wants you to come last, or something like this kind of team rules type thing?
I like the team rules idea. Quite well.
Okay, so let's say it's there's a team rules thing. I tell you that the thing I'm struggling with is I'm not getting any jeopardy. I'm not feeling. I mean, I know there is sort of in theory, but at the moment with the description, I'm getting a sense of kind of genre, but I'm not feeling like the hero has got has got a problem that they have to solve now, sort of thing. But maybe that's fine for the genre. But
yeah,
I think.
Sorry.
So go ahead.
No, I think that was sort of what I was going for as well a little bit with it. I said like one of the main inspirations was obviously Wipeout, but another inspiration is actually BoJack Horseman. The animated Netflix series with like this Charlie Sheen-ish horse who's like a washed up Hollywood star that basically he just makes like bad mistakes all the time, like constantly. You think he's going to change and you think that it's going to get better, but somehow he manages to always find a way to fuck it up, and it's sort of more of that, and he's also incredibly guilt-ridden because of it, which leads him into making more mistakes as well. And it's sort of like that part that I want to lean into with it, about how smaller choices you make like stack up into several bigger consequences, you could say.
Right. Can I just point out to everyone that Jacob has won this afternoon session, because Jacob is the first person to say lean into. Jacob, I was at a session, like a sort of seminar last week, and there was this woman from Vice, and she said lean into. She didn't say like or choose or anything. She always said lean into, and that was my note. I need to start saying lean into more. So just listen and learn, everybody. Jacob's got the lean in term sorted. So sorry, Jacob. We digress slightly. Yeah, well, great. Who's BoJack Horseman for?
BoJack Horseman is definitely for adults. I'd say 15 plus and up. I'd say.
Right. It's just he sounds like the sort of person that people who've had a chance to kind of fuck up in life are naturally going to warm to. Whereas if your target audience is 16-year-old gamers and 13-year-old gamers pretending they're 16 so they can hassle their parents to buy the game for them, but yes, it's I think also just in terms of the pitch, I haven't yet heard something that makes me understand why this guy or woman or something else that has been invented in the year 2012 must win. So there needs to be some penalty, so there's jeopardy. So the sense that, if you lose the race, it's not just you lose the